All right, Peter, we are live on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Yep. As I just gave you context, because we focus a lot on ADHD at Sleuth, your stories, the books that you wrote, and the way that you're centering children is really powerful to me. And I would love to kick off, given that we have limited time. I would love for you to share who you are. I know you as the founder of Harrow, so give us just a little context into that, and then your books, and then I'll dive right in with the questions.
Sure. I mean, pretty easy backstory. I started my career at America Online. It was the only job I ever had. They let us work any way we wanted, and that was pretty cool. Then after 3 years there, I went to my next job, which was at a magazine. And all of a sudden, we had 8 a.m. meetings and 9 a.m. meetings and 10 a.m. meetings and 12 o'clock check-ins and 1:30 this. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is Russia. This is horrible. I have to quit. And I lasted a week. Left that job, went out on my own. The goal was to start a PR firm, and I think I told my parents that when I fail, not if I fail, when I fail, I'll get a real job. It's going on, it'll be 25 years this October, and I haven't had to get a real job. So
there you go.
Been pretty lucky, busting my ass and having a lot of fun. I'm a talking head on most of the networks, CNN, MSNBC. What else do I do? I write books. I've had 6 bestsellers, including my latest one, The Boy with the Faster Brain, my first kid's book. And on my spare time, I'm a licensed skydiver and a Ironman triathlete. And then most importantly, I am a single dad of a lovely, almost 10-year-old daughter. She'll be 10 next week. And just trying to stay sane.
Awesome. So many questions. So my first is, why do you care so much about ADHD and changing the narrative?
When I grew up in the 70s and 80s in public school in New York City, ADHD wasn't a thing. What existed was sit down, you're disrupting the class disease. And it was really, really difficult. I had a really hard time growing up. School was really tough. And I realized there had to be something more. When I got diagnosed and everything made sense, I was like, wow, how come I can, this explains why I could start a company and sell it in under 3 years, but I can't keep a relationship going or whatever. And started doing a lot of research, a lot of work, and realized that the majority of ADHD, the way I use it, is a gift. Not many people can start and sell companies, start a company and have it up and running on a plane ride, or sell a company for millions in 3 years and things like that. And I realized that there is a gift to ADHD, and ADHD is actually a very, very beneficial and useful skill. The downside is if you don't know how to manage it correctly. ADHD is one molecule away from addiction. It is very, very close to a lot of negative things that are very easy to find and easy to get to. And so at the end of the day, you sort of try to figure out how to use the best and avoid the worst. And once you realize how to do that and learn how to do that, life is pretty awesome. And so I don't want kids to grow up and sort of have the same nightmare that I did. I want them to grow up and understand that they're awesome and that they can change the world if they learn how to use their ADHD for good.
Yeah. I mean, we see from the data that we have from parents, and we have hundreds of parents that talk about ADHD, that anxiety, a lot of their children have anxiety. And from what I could tell in your book, when you're talking about Peter, who goes in the classroom, he doesn't want to be disruptive, but he's trying to understand himself. So I think for a lot of people having a diagnosis, like there's a relationship between a diagnosis and understanding yourself better that I think you are elucidating in your work very much, that there's a power in the diagnosis.
Well, the interesting thing is, when I finally got diagnosed, it was like 2006 or something like that. And it's like, well, yeah, this all makes sense. But again, growing up, that didn't exist. And so it's not even so much the diagnosis. I mean, you break your leg, you see a bone sticking out of your leg, you pretty much know you have a broken leg, right? You don't need to diagnose it, you need to fix it. And so it's sort of the same thing with ADHD, and that I realize it's not so much that I need a name. It's nice to have a title for it. It's nice to have a name for it, but I don't need a diagnosis per se. What I need is to figure out how to use this. It's not going away, right? So what can I do to fix it? What can I do to make it better? And for me, those are the lessons I learned in terms of how to use this gift for betterment, how to use
Yeah.
this faster brain, and so I didn't look at it as a negative. Even growing up, all the lessons I learned growing up with ADHD, I still don't look at it as a negative. They were very positive for me, and I learned a ton.
Mhm.
And being
That's
able
great.
um, to look back on that, it was like, oh, what would you change if you go back in time? Absolutely nothing, because everything I learned and everything I did wound up helping me and wound up making me the person who I am. So, would I change something for kids today? Yeah, I'd want them to know they're not broken. I want them to know they have talents and they have gifts. Again, they just have to learn how to use those. But
Yeah.
for me, that was huge.
So what would you want to give, and like what would you tell parents who are trying to help their child see it as a gift and also give the resources to like unleash that gift?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that there is no negative. There is no that you're not broken. Your child isn't broken. Your child
Mhm.
isn't a failure. Nothing like that. We spend so much time looking at these things as negatives, just because someone is not the same as everyone else. And I am a big believer that being the same as everyone else is boring as hell. You
Mhm.
don't want to be the same as everyone else. You want to be different. Different is good. Different is wonderful. Different changes the world, right? If you can be the best thing in the world is to be different. And so the fact that your brain is different and you can do different things should be looked at as a gift. We should start understanding more and more that is a gift. Are there negatives? Of course, there are negatives to everything in the world, right? I mean, I had the social acuity of a turnip growing up, and it was horrible. And there was a lot of stuff that, because I didn't know any better. Now we do,
Yeah.
right? And so those are the kind of things that I want people to understand, that there are so many ways to make things better and change things. That's the key. Just understand how to use that and
Yeah.
understand how to use the brain.
I suspect that one of the biggest challenges parents of children with ADHD face right now is that maybe other people don't understand. Maybe that they're at a school where the teachers don't understand or their fellow classmates don't understand. And that feels a lot trickier because you have, as a family, a lot less control. Do you have any thoughts or advice on that?
One of the things that I learned, and it took me 40 years to learn it, and I wish I'd learned it when I was 10, is to stop giving a damn about what other people think. We
That's
spend we spend so much time, wasted
yeah,
time, caring about what people who have absolutely no bearing on our lives think about us.
yeah.
And why? What could possibly be the benefit of that? These people don't pay our mortgage, they don't pay our rent. Their opinion is real. I am who I am. Your opinion is not needed. It is irrelevant. The only people whose opinions I care about are my parents, my daughter, my girlfriend, maybe my best friend. That's about it. I
But
don't
as a
need.
child, but as a
It
developmentally,
is
as a
difficult as a
child
child.
at
I'm not
that
denying
age
that.
is
But the
different.
quicker you
Yeah.
can, the quicker you can teach children that the opinion that matters is your own, right?
Mhm.
If someone
Mhm.
is sitting there and they're spending their time mocking you or making fun of you, there's something wrong with them. Good people don't take pleasure in hurting other people,
Right.
right? And I
Right.
think that's a lesson that we need to teach more.
Right. I mean, I think what you're also talking about is empathy and kindness, and how do you build
Yeah.
that up for yourself, but also help inspire it in others to the extent that you have the capacity. Like I read this Instagram post yesterday that really broke my heart. It was from a mom of a child with cerebral palsy, and she went to the playground, and this little girl tried to play with three other girls, and those three other girls decided to make her the monster. And this mom was saying, like, this happens all the time. Like, I put a brave face on for social media, but this happens all the time. And so it got me thinking, like, the differences that we're all talking about, yeah, differences are great, but you and I have the foresight of being adults. When you're a child and going through that, it might feel different, right? And it's not surprising to me that anxiety is a big component of this. Um, and so I totally agree with you. I mean, I have a daughter around the same age as your daughter. It's hard though, right? Like it's hard to um help them see that. But I do think that based on what you've said about your own childhood and how supportive your parents are, it sounds like you get those lessons over time.
I'll take it
They
a step
kind of
further.
settle in.
I'll take it a step further. I was speaking to a school last week to about 100 kids in the school, and one
Mhm.
kid came up to me after the speech. It was in 5th grade, and he came over to me and he said, his head was down, and he didn't really look up at me, and he goes, "I want to thank you. I've never met anyone like me before who was successful." And I just gave the kid a hug. I mean, it broke my heart. It's like we need to be teaching kids that everyone's okay, that there's so much they can do, and so that they're good, that they have talent, and yeah, it broke my heart.
What are some of the ways that your ADHD has contributed to your success as an entrepreneur? Like very specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I literally came up with an idea on my way to Los Angeles International Airport, um, on a flight to New York, our flight to New York connecting in Houston. And I flew from LA to Houston and sketched it out, landed in Houston, went to the lounge, called a website builder I knew. I think I PayPal'd him like $100. And I landed 4 hours later, 5 hours after that at Newark, and the website was done. I launched the next morning, and that became Help a Reporter. And Help a Reporter was 3 years later sold for several $1,000,000. That's how ADHD works, right? ADHD works in that, hey, this might be the beauty of ADHD is that we're born with a very specific gene called the how hard can it be gene, and we have no problem trying new things. There's a reason I'm a skydiver with over 500 jumps. It seemed fun, right? And an added bonus. My first one got a huge hit of dopamine. I'm like, gotta do that shit again, and then it became real, right? And so I've done 2 Ironman triathlons, and you look at me and you're very confused because you're like, no, look at you. You've watched the movie Iron Man while sitting in your ass eating popcorn. But no, I swear I've done 2 Ironman because they're exciting and they're fun. And there's something that, why wouldn't I try that? Right. So, the concept of ADHD is this brilliant sort of, let's see what we can do. Let's have some fun with this type mentality. And that I wouldn't trade that for $1,000,000. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah. How have you managed it? What are tools? I know you're wearing your Peloton shirt. I'm a big Peloton user myself. Like, what are the other strategies that you found over time?
I'm on my Peloton every morning, probably 6 days a week, because if I don't have as good a day. I have a daughter, like I said, she's almost 10, and when she was 4, I didn't work out one morning, and we're having breakfast, and she goes, "Daddy, did you get on your bicycle this morning?" I said, "No, honey, I was tired." I said, "She goes, yeah, you're not as happy." Right? So she could tell. If she could tell at 4, the dopamine and the chemicals that go into your brain that I get from my exercise get me through the day. I box. I basically ride my Peloton and I box because murder is still illegal. And when you have ADHD, it's very easy to look at someone and just be incredibly direct. Go, yeah, no. Yeah, let's do it your way because it's easier, despite the fact it's the stupidest way I've ever heard. So ADHD, boxing, exercise, skydiving prevents me from saying things like that, right? It keeps me focused and in a better place. And gives me the chemicals I need that otherwise my brain wouldn't make. So that is hands down the number one way I handle it. I also eliminate choice. I have 2 sides to my closet and they are labeled, and one says office/travel and it's t-shirts and jeans. The other side says speaking/TV and it's button-down shirts, jackets, and jeans. My suits, my vests, my sweaters, those are all in my daughter's closet. Because if I had to wake up one day and every morning and look in the closet, okay, what should I wear today? Oh my God, that sweater. I remember that sweater. Laura gave me that sweater. God, I wonder how she's doing. It's 3 hours later. I'm naked in the living room on Facebook and I haven't left the house. So you eliminate choice any way possible. I'm very aware of what I eat. I'm not the best eater in the world. I'm going to have put a Whopper, double Whopper cheese in front of me. I'm going to eat that shit. But I also try very hard to focus on what I'm eating because eating helps, right? Eating good food makes for better brains. So, I try to avoid the carbs. I try to avoid processed foods, right? My basic rule is if my grandmother wouldn't have recognized it as food, I try not to eat it. Things like that. And then at the end of the day, you have to get your waffle. Enough. That's the pandemic dog. I swore I'd never get. At the end of the day, you have to get your sleep. So I try for 8 hours of sleep a night. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, how's that possible? You're up at 4 a.m. Right? I go to sleep at 8:30. My daughter goes down at 8. I am out by 8:30, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, you're up at 4 a.m. What are you, a farmer?" I'm like, "No, I'm better than you though, because I am doing the things I need to do to make my brain work. Again, I don't care what. Oh, you never go out. You don't go to parties. Oh no, how horrible!
Right.
I'm devastated. You know,
Did you
it's
always have that self-awareness of what you needed,
no,
like as
no.
a
Are you
kid?
kidding me?
Okay.
No, no,
Yeah. So
God,
how
no.
did you
Not,
cultivate it?
probably not until 15 years ago when I realized when I just stopped caring again. You know, you stop caring what other people think. It's like, how can I make my life better? Right? I want to help other people,
Yeah.
but I can't help other people unless my life's not improved as well. So how can I make my life better? And
So when it comes to interpersonal relationships, how does that
yeah, I
how
mean,
do
I
you
wasn't
manage
good at
that?
it. You know, I'm divorced. That should give you some idea. You know, but for me, a lot of it was learning about sort of what works for me, what doesn't work for me, and understanding that, you know, whoever I wind up with is going to have to understand A, that I'm different, but B, also that I'm trying. Right? It is not easy to be in an interpersonal relationship when you have ADHD, but you can also focus on um, doing things that helps. You know, like one of the things I learned when I was married, I learned too late, but one of the things I learned was when I'd come home and have a really exciting day and everything was great. You know, I would come in and be it didn't matter what my wife was doing at the time, or you know, I had a time. So I learned to, when I get outside my apartment door, to take just a minute or two and take several deep breaths and ground myself, right? Become grounded and focus on sort of the conversation I'm going to have. I play it out in my head. I'm going to come home. I'm going to say hi. I'm going to, you know, ask her about her day first, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
eventually I'll be able to tell, she's not going anywhere. I'll be able to tell her my story and how great my
Yeah.
day was. But, you know, the key is to be able to sort of play these things out in your head. Alcoholics have a phrase called, it's called playing the tape forward. How am I going to feel in 12 hours
Mhm.
if I have this drink, or if I do whatever, this thing, or however it's supposed to be? And
Mhm.
so for me, I found that to be very helpful. How am I going to feel
Yeah.
in,
I like that. That makes
yeah.
sense.
So that to me is sort of huge. And I try to do that
Yeah.
as much as humanly possible.
I think some people have the tension of, particularly if you're a parent, where you're like, how much does your child bend to the norms of the world versus how much can you ask the world to be more inclusive? And so I like the fact that when you're talking about the running the tape forward, it's about you and how you feel, because
Yeah.
it can be very hard um, to, you know, like a lot of kids have, whether they have ADHD or something else, they have restraint collapse when they get home, right? They're
Yep.
totally functioning, they're masking at school, and then they come home and it all comes out. And I think that is, it's, I mean, it's common, but I think about that with my own daughter, and I always worry that like she's not being herself at school, and like what's the line of her advocating? And what I hear from you is that you're really good at advocating. Were you
You
always
have to
that
be. You
way?
have no choice. You have no choice, because at the end of the day, what winds up happening is if you're not doing well for yourself, how can
Yeah,
you possibly help anyone else? Right? You
yeah.
have to do that. So for me, that's super important. And I
So you're
try
very
really
driven by also helping others. That's an interest. Where did that come from in
exactly.
you?
The more you do whatever, you know, the more you help yourself in whatever capacity, the more you can help other people.
Yeah. Do you, when you think back to your career at AOL and you think about the workplace now, particularly post-pandemic, what do you think it looks like for people who might be Gen Z entering the workforce and have ADHD? And like, how can their like, yeah, what does it look like?
On the plus side, we are starting to see companies pay a lot more attention to mental health. I, over the past several months, have been asked to speak and help draft policy for companies ranging from Adobe to Morgan Stanley to Google, things like that, talking about neurodiversity and neuro DEI. And so for me, that is huge, because if we're talking more about that, there's a way to get people to speak about it, understand it, for companies to understand that the creativity of the neurodiverse is so much greater than the creativity of a non-neurodiverse or a neurotypical person. There is so much benefit to companies. And the nice thing about it, and this is what companies are starting to realize, and this I love, companies are starting to understand that helping make the workplace a safer place or a better place for those with neurodiversity are actually a form of what's called curb cuts. In World War II, at the end of World War II, about 600,000 veterans came home injured, and a lot of them were, were in wheelchairs or paralyzed, or whatever. And every city and every town created curb cuts on the sidewalk, those little ramps at the end of every block that you see where cars, people, wheelchairs can get. And what wound up happening was they not only helped the 600,000 veterans, they helped the elderly, they helped pregnant women, they helped men with delivery carts, they helped women with shopping carts, they helped kids. So it's one of those things where you do something for one segment of society that benefits everyone. And so to understand, to make neurodiverse workspaces, things like that, is incredibly beneficial because it helps everyone. I spent time with a company and helped them create a neurodiverse workplace for people coming back to work. They were going back into the office and they wanted to go back to 3 days a week versus work at home the entire time. And the neurodiverse group there, which was a very large group, was getting very upset because they had learned to work really, really well at home, and they were being much more productive. And so I worked with them, and we created they have hot desks. So basically, you go into you take whatever desk you want, and we created a red, yellow, green light system where every desk had 3 lights. You choose the one you want: red, yellow, green. Red means don't bother me, I'm deep in work. Yellow means you can bother me if it's important, we can talk. Green means let's brainstorm, I'm free. And execs were afraid that everyone was just going to go red for 3 days in a row. What wound up happening was they'd go red the first day. And then by the middle of the second day, they were so ahead of their schedule for what they had to do work-wise, so much more productive, they would go yellow or green. And the third day was almost all green. And so productivity actually increased, right? So listening to your employees and doing things in a new way it's not the way it's always been done before. Things like that, tremendous benefits.
Yeah, that's huge. Are these some of the policy, are these examples of policy recommendations that you've given to these workplaces?
Yeah, they're definitely ways to help. I've helped, like I said, I've helped craft some policy for that. And it's, it's the premise of understanding your audience, right? Your audience, in this case, the employees, they want to do their best work, and they are more inclined to do their best work when they are given the tools they need, and B, the knowledge that the way they like to work is going to be acceptable to the company and embraced by the company. If that means coming in some days at 4 a.m. and working until noon because it's less distraction, whatever the case may be, so be it.
Yeah. Right. And that takes out a lot of stress, right? Because if you are producing, but you feel like you have to fit this very rigid day, it just makes you less productive. If you go back several years in that person's journey, what do you think schools could be doing better in order to prepare for this kind of future of work for a neurodiverse workplace?
One of the things that I'm seeing is that schools are finally starting to realize that not everyone learns the same way. A couple of 200 years ago, 200 or 300 years ago, we decided that students had to sit at desks in rows and columns. Says who, right? Why is that the best way to teach kids? So you're seeing even just little things like that, right? Being able to sit in a semicircle, being able to sit on the floor, being able to do, to stand up and go to the back of the room if you need a break, if you need to just sort of stretch your muscles or do some jumping jacks or whatever, anything to keep you, to keep the dopamine up. When I was growing up, if I got distracted or I started messing around, it was Peter, pay attention. Now it's Peter, you seem a little distracted. Do you want to go to the back of the room and take some deep breaths or something like that? And you can do that, and it doesn't affect the rest of the class. It doesn't bother everyone. It doesn't disrupt anyone. I was getting in trouble as a kid because I was disrupting the class, and the reason I was making jokes and things like that, and that would get me sent to the principal's office. What I didn't realize at the time, every day I'd come home with a note, and my parents would get angry at me, and I would swear to God I'd never do it again. And the next day I'd do it again, and I didn't realize why do I keep doing this? I must just be a bad kid. No, you're addicted. When you make a joke, you get a dopamine hit. Your body's craving that dopamine. It's no different than doing cocaine. And so I'm learning now, and I've learned it years ago, that let's find a substitution. Instead of interrupting the class, let's find a substitution for that dopamine. Maybe it is jumping up and down. Maybe it's running up the stairs in between classes to get a little workout, whatever, right? If those kind of things that allow you to use your ADHD to its best, and that's what schools and businesses are starting to understand, and that to me is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. In your book, Peter goes to a therapist, and one of the modes that they use is cognitive behavioral therapy. What are other modes that you've seen work amongst kids when you were doing this?
Well, CBT is I mean, again, I'm not a doctor, but CBT is a great one.
But
Cognitive behavioral therapy is huge. But one of the, simple things is like exercise or even eating healthier. We wake the kids up 45 minutes before they have to catch the bus. They get dressed, they wash their face, they come downstairs, they have 2 bowls of chocolate frosted sugar bombs while on their iPad, and then we send them to school where they sit all day and we wonder why they're not focused. Right? A study was done at a university or a school district in Texas where they gave they swapped out the breakfast and kids started getting a lot of protein instead of carbs for breakfast, and same thing with lunch. And they gave the kids 90 minutes of recess instead of 20. And ADHD outbursts in boys dropped 17%, and increases in girls focusing and asking questions and things like that in class increased by 13% because girls present differently than boys. And those are huge numbers. Those are huge numbers. They did nothing else but change the food and give them more exercise. Nothing else.
Yeah. So much of this almost feels like just like your kid and their routine, and like almost like micro testing things. Like if I give them protein for breakfast for this many days, what's their reaction? How do they come? So
100%.
Yeah, I totally agree. I forgot my question, so I'm going to ask the second question I had for you, which is like, what didn't I ask you? What do you want people to know about your work or this book?
I think at the end of the day, I just want parents to understand their children are not broken if they're getting diagnosed with ADHD or any form of neurodiversity. They're not broken. They're gifted, and they can do almost anything in the world. They just need someone to believe in them, and they need to understand they need to believe in themselves. You get that, and this kid's going to change the world.
Yeah, I think it's important. I know from a bunch of pediatricians that I talk to that part of the dynamic is the parent having their own journey with their child's diagnosis, because whether we like it or not, we live in a culture where parents take on a lot of self-blame, as if when they're saying that there's something wrong with my kid, I actually don't think that's what they're saying. I think they're saying there's something wrong with me and how I parented. And realizing that we don't have control over everything, I think is a huge step to then opening up what we can do for our child to support them. So Peter, thank you so much. Grab your copy of this. And we look forward to reading more about your work in this, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Always happy to come back. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.